On today's show, it wasn't pretty, it wasn't easy, but the Buccaneers just flipped the switch back to playoff mode. Let's get it! Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show online, BucsReport.com. And the best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe to the Bucs Report on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. So in this edition of the Bucs Report, the Bucs are back in the win column with a 20-17 victory over the Cardinals. How are they able to get it done? In a game where it was questionable if Baker Mayfield was going to even be in the game. There was a real feeling that we very well could see Teddy Bridgewater in this game. And what would that have meant? And, if you listen or watch this show on a regular basis, I said, if there was a game to play and have Teddy Bridgewater in there, that was the game. Because, well, the Cardinals are not one of the better teams in the NFL this season. But to be clear here, this wasn't, stick a boot to the throat of your opponent to apply a little bit of pressure. This was a game that did not come easily for the Buccaneers. They did win this game, and I guess that's all that matters. But just let's talk about the box score before we dive into the episode here. A 20-17 victory. And, you take a look at the Buccaneers and where they're at. 7-5 record, first place in the NFC South, and they didn't win the game too handily against the Cardinals, who are 3-9. So it just goes to show you that there are trap games. I guess it's a good thing that the Buccaneers didn't fall into said trap, but there are no easy games in the NFL, as was apparent in that game. And, you also take a look around the NFL and the teams that the Buccaneers have struggled against, that the Panthers are playing. I'm talking about the Panthers versus the Rams, a team that really handed it to the Buccaneers some time ago there. So, you take a look at it, the Bucs 7-5, but nipping at their heels is the Carolina Panthers with a 7-6 record. The Buccaneers have no time to get complacent. They have no time to say, look at the Saints, a 2-10 record. This is going to be a walk in the park when at the end of the day, and I'll talk about that in the final segment, but the Saints are playing for pride. They're playing for future jobs and ultimately the jersey on their chest. There's some pride every time they put on that jersey and helmet that they want to do the best for New Orleans. But just let's talk about the game, the most recent game here against the Cardinals. And like I said, the biggest takeaway is the Buccaneers just saved their season with one ugly, gritty, beautiful win. And all right, big picture first. The W matters more than the way it came. You can overanalyze fancy stats later. Right now, you have to win that stops a slide. And there was the feeling of, well, is Baker going to be in there? Is it going to be Teddy Bridgewater? And what does it mean? What does that mean for the Buccaneers season if they, in fact, lose to the Cardinals? And bigger picture, if Baker Mayfield still is out, right? But the win keeps you in first place and buys confidence going into a stretch of games, that division games, that, that this team is in a good spot. And, they have some games coming up next here in the future here with Carolina that they could really kind of separate themselves, or they could set themselves back, that there is no time to take the pedal off the metal. You had a momentum swinging against you, 3 losses in a row. The division, like I said, closing fast, with Carolina doing the unthinkable thing. And just remembering back to last season and the absolute dumpster fire that was Carolina. As it turns out, that Dave Canales is the one that kind of whipped that team into shape. Carolina wins, and suddenly your lead is nothing. The absolute worst thing that could have been another loss that turns the rest of the schedule into panic mode. But they didn't fold. They found ways to win. When the offense was not flashy, defense and special teams picked them up. And, the funny thing is, looking at the box score, watching the game, and, on the game, Baker Mayfield was 18 for 28, 194 yards passing, 1 touchdown. And, but you scan down the box score, and a guy that has a touchdown. Yes, Tristan Wirfs had a touchdown in this game, if you can believe it. Definitely not something that I had circled as a probability going into this game, going into any game really, is to see Tristan Wirfs score a touchdown. But he did just that. But a 57-yard kick, 2 fourth-down stops, a tackle-eligible touchdown by Wirfs. That is the kind of game you remember when you talk about team identity. It was messy sometimes, but teams that survive messiness are the ones that make the playoffs. And you think about it, you hold on to first place in the NFC South, even with the record only at 7-5. You preserve belief in Todd Bowles' approach and in Baker Mayfield's ability to get the job done under pressure, because it's a yearly thing, right? It is almost a sign of the fall. A harbinger of the fall is when we start talking, or winter is when we start talking about Todd Bowles being on the hot seat. But the buy-in matters in December and January. A win like this reverberates in the locker room. Guys will say, we can grind through anything. That mentality helps with injuries and rolling out backups, because now everyone remembers defense closes, special team flip field position, and we can still win. The biggest weakness on this team right now is the defense. Was better in the last game, of course, but still a far cry from where it needs. But closing thoughts on this segment here, this team will not dominate every opponent, but they can win ugly when they have to. And in the NFL, that skill is still priceless. And, you take a look at it, for as dinged up as Baker Mayfield was, supposed to have been, he still found a way to scramble and run with the football, and, sometimes to his own detriment, right? That there were moments, and you saw him slide in the game, but could you just think if he took another, significant impact, that really could have set him back a notch or two, that if he had been injured, I'd be talking to you about, why was he in there? Why didn't they have Teddy Bridgewater in a game against a truly poor team? As it turns out, Baker Mayfield was able to dig deep and help lift the Buccaneers back into the win column. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Baker Mayfield's toughness is carrying this team right now. Straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. Again, you can also find this show on the Bucs Minicast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. And make sure and subscribe on YouTube. And let's blow up this Bucs Report YouTube channel as much as we can. So in segment 2 here, we're talking about Baker Mayfield's toughness is carrying this team, because Baker the man showed up physically and mentally. With the questions, and what we saw the week before was that Teddy Bridgewater was getting the starting reps, preparing to be the starter in the game. But as it turns out, it didn't have to come to that. But he was limited in practice. He had that shoulder concern, yet he ran the offense, scrambled when needed, and avoided turnovers. That is the hallmark of leadership in a tight game, because to go back to the box score, talking about Baker Mayfield, 0 interceptions. Something that was kind of a knock on his earlier career, before the Bucs, and even what we saw in last season, where there were some interceptions in there, but definitely, has turned the corner as far as not being that guy anymore. But let's walk through why this matters, his toughness and the hallmark of leadership in this game, because the game film shows Baker choosing the right moments to take off. Not reckless, calculated. 3 non-kneel down runs for 25 yards with a 21-yard scramble that converted a 3rd and 3. Those are the plays that keep drives alive and turn 3 and outs into sustained possessions. Those plays changed the scoreboard and time of possession. That it would have been easy to just hand off the football or to just pass it, and if no one was available, to just run for the sideline or whatever the case is. Kind of like, Tom Brady, he was not a scrambler, but Baker Mayfield is not cut from that same cloth. But when you take a look at it, then there was the pass game, 18 completions on 28 attempts is efficient, right? And 194 yards and a touchdown to Wirfs on a tackle eligible trick play. Again, tell me if you had that on your bingo card to start the season, and maybe you should try your luck in Vegas. That play is gutsy to call in a tight game, and it requires a QB that can trust his legs and his timing. Baker did that. He did not force throws into tight windows when pressure collapsed. He managed the pocket, stepped up into throws, and when needed, he checked down and let the run game eat. Because you take a look at it, things that can derail these games. Turnovers are killers. He had none, 0. And that alone can win games. The Bucs, as a team, are built around taking care of the ball on offense and letting the defense create mistakes. Baker gave them that. And that was a Baker in the game that was not 100%. How Baker's performance impacts the season. Those are the questions that people ask me. Well, how big of a difference maker is Baker? And I would say he keeps the offense from self-sabotage in close games. Allows the coaching staff to be aggressive on 4th down because they trust the QB to handle the pressure. He helps with the locker room leadership. Those, things that aren't easily quantifiable, especially with so many offensive injuries. And also post-game comments matter, saying he did not take direct hits and he feels good, reassures teammates and coaches. And, energy ripples through a roster. Confidence is contagious. If you walk into it, woe is me, that, we suck right now, we got to get it together, then your team is going to feel defeated. Baker Mayfield does not have that in his DNA to feel defeated. And the guy that has been dubbed Big Brother instead of playing with Dad, I think that, the Buccaneers played well under Brady. A different dynamic, but I believe this team plays even that much better with Baker at the helm. So final thought on Baker, he is not a perfect passer every week, but he is running winning football. And at this point of the season, that matters more than highlight reel stats. An ugly win, I guess you could say, that it should have been a greater trouncing of the Cardinals was not the case, but at the end of the day, the Buccaneers got it done. All right, Nets, let's pivot to the defense bent, scared everyone, then slammed the door shut. This game felt like a microcosm of Tampa's defense all year. Like, we're gonna generate offense, but the defense is gonna fold, and I'm gonna be coming to you guys talking about another loss. They gave up chunks. They let teams move. Then when it matters, they make turnovers and stops in the red zone. That pattern continues and is why they won. And, it's not just a statement. If you want evidence, Antoine Winfield Jr. with a diving interception in the red zone early. That takes points off the board and flips momentum immediately. Logan Hall forcing a fumble later. SirVocea Dennis breaking up the final 4th down pass to seal the game. Those are splash plays layered on top of disciplined play. But, the thing of it is, it's not just the splash plays. Look up front. Yaya Diaby, Vita Vea collapsing pockets and getting sacks at critical moments. Those rushes, when you watch the game, created hurried throws and limited Jacoby Brissett Brissett on certain drives. The defense allowed 260 yards, which feels like a lot, but situationally, they won the play that mattered. And why the defense is playoff relevant, and, because it is so drawn under fire. And how will the Buccaneers play if they do? Say they win the NFC South. Say they make it to the playoffs. Turnover margin is huge. The Bucs are top tier in takeaway percentage, and that creates scoring opportunities for an offense that is inconsistent. They win fourth quarter in good ways. 2 fourth down stops in the final period says this team trusts its scheme and it can execute under pressure. And it's not just, Levante David and the grizzled old vets on this team. Younger guys like Dennis, Hall, Tyke Smith making game-changing plays builds depth and confidence. The defense and coaching deserves a nod. Players and plays designed that hide matchups, timely blitz packages, and the discipline to not sell out on big plays too early. That shows veteran defensive coaching. And this group can be a backbone in tight games. So the defense still gives up yards, but they win plays that decide games. And with that clutch ability, you're not panicking when the offense sputters. That if the defense can actually dig deep, you might be able to do the unthinkable thing and win a game. All right, let's pivot to the Tristan Wirfs touchdown that changed the entire energy of the game. And, watching the game, I was watching it, and, in that moment when I saw Tristan Wirfs catch the football, and when I saw him run it into the end zone, it was one of those moments that got me out of off my couch and pumping my fist like, are you for real right now? Did I see Tristan Wirfs just run in a touchdown? I'll say it again. Left tackle catching a touchdown in a crucial moment is a momentum earthquake. And you can feel the energy in the stadium change. You can feel Arizona second guessing. That catch did more than put points on the board. And, you ask questions. Well, why is that any different? It came in a sequence where the Bucs were converting multiple times inside the red zone. The trick play indicated coaching trust, and Baker showed poise, that he trusted that he was able to pull it off and that Wirfs was able to pull it off. And that's the kind of play that lifts an entire offense and gives the defense a bit of a cushion to breathe. But, beyond that, beyond the spectacle and the, oh my God, did I just see that? There are 3 football reasons it mattered. Field position flip. We had drives to go long or stall. Turning a short field opportunity into a touchdown changes how Arizona approaches their next drive. The psychological edge. When your left tackle is catching touchdowns, opponents start to think creatively about how the Bucs run plays. That unpredictability is an asset. They did not draft that one up. They did not see that play in any pre-scouting. I assure you that. But I think what it did is it provided the locker room with some juice. That play injects energy, and guys feed off that boldness. It says the team believes in creativity under pressure. And you see that, with that or other trick plays, flea flickers, those kind of things. You're like, wow, if you can pull that off, it looks impressive. I'm going to go ahead and say that, most of the time when I see those trick plays, they kind of go down in flames. But let's not also forget about Bucky Irving in this segment too. His return from the 7 missed games was immediate. 83 yards from scrimmage and a 13-yard touchdown run that put the Bucs up 17-3. He provided balance to the attack, running the ball effectively keeps pressure off Baker and sets up those trick plays. And, kudos to the coach as well. He deserves his flowers here as well. The willingness to declare Wirfs eligible. Just the fact that they signed off on that play is something. Bring in Charlie Heck for a moment and execute without hesitation shows a staff ready to take calculated risks. This is how you win. It's not all just drawn out plays that you see every Sunday. It's kind of thinking outside the box and throwing the football to Wirfs. That's way outside the box. But so that's a big thing. The things that swung the momentum in that game: Wirfs touchdown catch, Bucky Irving 13-yard touchdown run, Mayfield 21-yard scramble to convert a 3rd down earlier in the game. Each of those moments flows into the next, and that is how messy games turn into victories. So when we take a look at it, a nice win by the Buccaneers. And like I said, it was the trick plays. It was Baker Mayfield good to go. It was Bucky back in the game that, despite kind of, a box score that ended in victory, but was a lot closer than it should have been. I think that I will remember this game about, thinking outside of the box and ultimately how this Bucs team really had to kind of throw away their clipboard and their sketches of how this game should have been. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Saints Week is all about turnovers and trench warfare. Straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report podcast. Part of the Bucs Report podcast network, also on the Bucs Minicast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. Again, help grow this show. Subscribe to it on YouTube. Give it a thumbs up. Comment anything down below. That helps feed the algorithm. All right, in the final segment here, we're talking about the Bucs versus the Saints, or the Aints, as all those clever people like to say out there. But you take a look at it. The thing that I want to say that I mentioned off the top of the show is don't enter into this game thinking it's going to be a slam dunk. Baker Mayfield hates the Saints. I hate the Saints. I think the Saints hate the Bucs and vice versa. That despite the Saints 2-10 record and the Buccaneers 7-5 record, that there is some bad blood that runs deep. And if you are already penciling this one as a dub for the Buccaneers, maybe not so fast. On paper, it looks like it, of course, but let's dive into it and what to expect in this game. So here's where we're at. This game matters because this week against New Orleans, division games are weird, messy, and everything gets magnified. The easiest way to boil this matchup down is turnovers plus how well the Bucs survive the trenches. And why turnovers are the fulcrum. The Saints rank low in turnover margin. The Bucs are high. Historically in this matchup, whoever wins the turnover battle takes the dub. In Week 8, Tampa won the turnover battle 4-1, and the Saints were shut out of rhythm. When you force 3 or 4 turnovers, that's not just points, it's time of possession and scoreboard control. Now the trenches, Tristan Wirfs is questionable with an oblique. That is huge. We know that Wirfs missed some time to start the season, and he is the guy that protects Baker out there, right? And those guys have a good relationship that I think that it allows Baker to feel more confident that maybe he can kind of just take his time, or maybe that he's not going to be under the gun right away. If Wirfs is limited or out, the Bucs face edge rushers like Chase Young and Cameron Jordan more directly. Baker will be under pressure. Play calling has to adjust. Losing all-pro left tackle in a division game is massive. It forces quick passing, max protection, and more reliance, on the run game to occupy the rushers. On the other side, the Saints may be missing players as well. And, those are players that are going to affect the outcome of the Saints as well. What the Bucs need to do to win: protect the football. Fewer turnovers means fewer short fields for the Saints. Win the line of scrimmage. Even with Wirfs limited, the interior blocking and run game must be physical. Lean on special teams to flip field position if the offense struggles early. And a note here as well. Remember that Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan are out. They will not be in there. Jalen McMillan, we know, got injured in the preseason. Mike Evans has been out for a bit here. But if you had those players to be back in the mix to help the Bucs win this game, go ahead and cross those 2 players out. It makes, guys like, Godwin and Tez Johnson even more critical. And it makes Bucky Irving's running and pass catches even more important. So final call here. This will be ugly, punishing, and grinded out football. You better believe it, because like I said, despite the standings and only the 2 wins by the Saints, that they're going to just throw the kitchen sink at the Bucs because of who they are. But if the Bucs can keep it close into the fourth quarter and rely on the defense to create a turnover or two, they have the edge. If Baker's under pressure and mistakes creep in, this could slip fast. So the focus is simple: ball security, line play, and special teams execution. And I think the Buccaneers could walk away from this one victorious. All things considered, it's all about wins and losses, and it's all about the standings. And I've, recited where the Bucs are multiple times in this episode. As I record this right now, they are in first place, 7-5. Panthers 7-6. Those are the only two teams to worry about. Falcons 4-8. Saints 2-10. That the Panthers. Yeah, can you believe I'm saying that the Panthers are a real threat to the Buccaneers? If they get hot, or for some reason the Buccaneers get cold, things could get flipped on their head. I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't want to live in the land of woulda, shoulda, coulda, or dive into the negative waters. I'm just playing out all possible scenarios that the Buccaneers should feel good, but they should not feel comfortable, because you got to know that Carolina, the Panthers, are going to be nipping at their heels. Listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network. Once again, follow us, subscribe on wherever you find your podcasts, but also subscribe to the Bucs Report on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. And I'll talk to you guys again next time.